The ad seemed harmless enough. Summer caretaker needed. Isolated mountain lodge. Basic maintenance, night security, and daily logs required. Food and lodging provided. $1,200 a week. Must be comfortable with solitude. For Ethan Blake it sounded perfect. At 21 he was a junior at State College, majoring in environmental science. The summer ahead looked bleak. His friends had internships lined up, his girlfriend had left for a semester abroad, and his part-time campus job had dried up. So, when he found the listing pinned to a corkboard outside the library, it felt like fate. A quiet summer in the mountains, far away from the noise of the city. Time to think. Time to breathe. Time to figure out what to do with his life. He accepted the job within 2 days. Arrival at Blackridge Lodge. The first thing Ethan noticed when the shuttle dropped him off was how silent everything was. The Blackridge Lodge sat high in the Rockies, surrounded by endless stretches of pine and sharp peaks biting into a cobalt blue sky. The place looked like a postcard: tall timber walls, green-trimmed windows, a wraparound porch with rocking chairs, and a carved wooden sign hanging above the entrance. But there were no guests. "Summer season hasn't picked up yet," said the driver, a gruff man in his 60s who barely spoke during the 2-hour ride up the winding roads. "You'll be the only one up here aside from the manager. He comes by once a week to drop off supplies. You'll get used to it." The manager, a man named Mr. Harland, was already waiting on the porch when Ethan arrived. He was tall, thin, with skin weathered by years of sun and wind. His handshake was cold and firm. "Keep the place clean," Harland said as he walked Ethan through the lodge. "Keep an eye on the cameras, especially at night. Don't leave the lodge after dark. Cell service is non-existent up here, so use the landline if there's an emergency." Ethan laughed nervously. "What kind of emergency are we talking about?" Harlan didn't smile. "You won't have one if you stay inside." The first few days passed uneventfully. Ethan explored the lodge during daylight, familiarizing himself with the empty dining hall, the silent game room, the long hallways lined with guest suites, and the staff quarters where he stayed. At night, he sat at the security desk in the lobby, sipping coffee and watching the 6 camera feeds flicker across the old monitor. Most of the time there was nothing to see, just static views of empty hallways, the locked front doors, and the wind stirring the trees outside. The isolation didn't bother him at first. He liked the stillness, the way the air smelled like pine and rain. He spent his days reading, cleaning, and hiking the trails that wound around the mountain. By the end of the first week, though, the silence began to feel heavy. The first noise. It started on a Wednesday night, just after midnight. Ethan was at the desk, reading an old paperback, when he heard it. Footsteps. Soft, deliberate, coming from the second-floor hallway. He froze, listening. The lodge was supposed to be empty. No guests. No staff. The footsteps stopped. Ethan leaned forward, staring at the grainy black and white feed from the second-floor camera. The hallway was empty, just the patterned carpet, the wooden doors, and the dim glow of the emergency lights. "Hello?" he called, his voice shaky as it echoed down the empty lobby. No response. After a few minutes of tense silence, he convinced himself it was nothing. Maybe the building settling, maybe an animal outside. But then, just as he was about to sit back down, he heard it again. Step, step, step. This time closer. The whispers. By the second week, the noises had become routine. Every night, sometime between midnight and 3, Ethan would hear the pacing, slow, steady footsteps moving up and down the halls above him. Sometimes he'd hear soft knocking on one of the guest room doors. Sometimes, in the dead quiet, he'd hear his name, whispered so faintly he thought he imagined it. Ethan. He tried to tell himself it was stress. Cabin fever. Maybe he was just lonely. But the cameras never lied. No matter how many times he rewound the tapes, there was never anyone there. The journal. At the start of the 3rd week, while cleaning one of the upstairs suites, Ethan found an old leather-bound journal shoved under a dresser. The first few entries were mundane, notes from a previous caretaker about cleaning schedules and supply deliveries. But as the pages went on, the handwriting grew erratic, desperate. The pacing starts after midnight. I've checked the cameras, there's no one there. It's standing in the hallway now. Watching. Waiting. If you see it in the feed, don't move. Don't let it know you can see it. The final page was nothing but frantic, smeared ink. The final night. It was storming the night it finally happened. Rain lashed against the windows, and thunder rolled through the valley as Ethan sat at the desk, staring at the monitors. He hadn't been sleeping well, and his eyes burned from exhaustion. Then, at exactly 2:47 a.m., the pacing began. Slow, heavy footsteps. Down the second-floor hall. He flipped to the feed, his stomach twisting. For the first time, the camera glitched, static tearing across the screen. When it cleared, something was there. A pale figure, tall and thin, standing at the far end of the hallway. Its head tilted unnaturally, its limbs too long, its face blank. Ethan couldn't move. He sat frozen in the chair, his heart hammering as the thing slowly turned its head toward the camera. Toward him. And then, without a sound, it began to move, gliding down the hall toward the stairs. The feed cut to static again. When it returned, Ethan saw himself, sitting at the desk on the monitor, and behind him, the figure, standing impossibly close. The screen went black. They found the lodge empty the next morning when Harland arrived for his weekly supply drop. Ethan was gone. The only sign he had ever been there was the logbook, open on the desk, with one final entry scrawled in shaky handwriting. "It knows my name." The last summer before college was supposed to be perfect. For Maya, it was the last taste of freedom before moving to Boston for her freshman year. For Tyler, it was a chance to squeeze in as much fun as possible before football tryouts consumed his life. Claire wanted adventure. Josh wanted a break from his dead-end summer job, and Eli, well, he just went wherever Claire went. 5 friends. 1 long weekend. And the abandoned resort they had heard about from locals in the nearby beach town of Coral Bay. "It's supposed to be haunted," Claire said as they loaded their bags into Tyler's old Jeep. She leaned back in the passenger seat, sunglasses perched on her head, grinning like this was just another summer thrill. "Everything's haunted to you," Josh muttered, shoving a cooler into the back. "No, seriously," Claire continued, her voice dropping conspiratorially. "My cousin came here last summer. He said there are rooms still full of food and luggage. Like people just disappeared overnight." Maya laughed, trying to mask the unease curling in her stomach. "Creepy urban legend. I'm in." The drive took them nearly 2 hours, narrow, winding roads cutting through endless stretches of palm trees and salt marshes until the asphalt turned to gravel. By the time they reached the rustic gates of the Azure Shore Resort, the sun was dipping toward the horizon, bleeding gold and crimson across the water. The resort. The place had been closed for more than 15 years, but it looked frozen in time. A faded sign reading "Welcome to Paradise" swung loosely in the humid breeze. The main building, once white, had yellowed and cracked, with vines curling up its walls like skeletal fingers. The pool was empty, the tiles cracked and littered with dry leaves. But the strangest thing was the stillness. No birds. No waves. No sound but the crunch of their shoes on the overgrown path. "This is insane," Eli whispered, his voice bouncing off the empty walls. "Why does it feel like everyone just left?" Inside, the lobby was coated in dust, but otherwise untouched. Overturned chairs, faded pamphlets advertising summer specials, a reception desk still stocked with pens and keycards. A guest book sat open, the last entry dated July 18, 2007. Exploring the ruins. They split up to explore. Maya and Tyler wandered through the old restaurant, where tables were still set with plates and silverware. There was even a half-finished bottle of wine on the counter, its cork dried and brittle. Claire darted ahead into the hallways lined with guest rooms, her phone flashlight cutting through the darkness. Everywhere they went, it was the same. Luggage left open on beds, toiletries on bathroom counters, half-packed suitcases in corners. It was like everyone had been told to leave and they never came back. The decision. "This is perfect," Claire said later, her voice echoing in the empty dining hall. She dropped her bag on one of the dusty tables and grinned. "Let's stay here tonight. One night. We'll set up in the ballroom or something. It'll be like camping, just creepier." Maya hesitated. "Are you serious? This place is, I don't know, wrong." "Come on, Maya," Tyler said, trying to sound casual but already setting up his sleeping bag. "It's just an abandoned resort. What's the worst that could happen?" Reluctantly, she agreed. By 10 p.m., they had unrolled their sleeping bags in the grand ballroom, a cavernous space with peeling wallpaper and a shattered chandelier hanging precariously from the ceiling. They lit a few battery-powered lanterns, cracked open beers, and tried to laugh off the unease settling in their bones. The night. The first few hours were fine. They drank. They told ghost stories. Josh dared Eli to explore the basement, which Eli declined with a string of colorful curses. The night was humid and heavy, and by midnight, they finally drifted to sleep, lulled by the distant crash of waves against the shore. Maya woke up first. It was still dark, though the faintest light from the lanterns glowed dimly around the room. For a moment she didn't know why she'd woken, until she heard it. Footsteps. Soft, slow just outside the ballroom. At first she thought it was Tyler or Claire getting up, but then she realized the steps weren't moving away. They were circling. Her chest tightened as she sat up, careful not to make a sound. The room was silent except for the rhythmic shuffle of feet on tile. Then a whisper. So faint she almost convinced herself she imagined it. Leave. When the others woke with the first light of dawn, Maya didn't say anything. She didn't want to sound crazy. It wasn't until Tyler went to grab his backpack that anyone noticed. The floor around their sleeping bags, dusty and untouched when they'd settled down the night before, was now covered in footprints. Not their own. Bare feet, small, wet, as though whoever, or whatever, had been walking the ballroom floor had just come from the ocean. The prints stopped inches away from Maya's sleeping bag. Panic hit all at once. They packed up in minutes, their hands shaking, their voices sharp with fear. No one spoke as they ran down the overgrown path, back through the gates and into the safety of the morning light. When they finally stopped at the edge of town, gasping for breath, Maya finally looked back. For a split second, she swore she saw a figure standing at the edge of the trees near the resort, watching them. And just before Tyler started the car, her phone buzzed with a notification. A photo, time-stamped at 3:13 a.m. of her and her friends asleep in the ballroom. The angle was from above, as if taken by someone standing right over them.